This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, the Dream Coach. This is the show where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. And believe me, sometimes it's difficult to get to the truth of who we really are. Childhood traumas may have made us afraid and silenced us from wanting or even being able to speak what's really in our hearts. This was the case for my guest today, Becky Norwood. But deep down, she realized there had to be another way. She was able to find herself and ultimately her mission through what I considered to be an unusual method, the power of story. As author of the best-selling book, The Woman I Love, Becky began her journey of growth and healing, which led her to create her own publishing company, where she now helps others find their voices through their stories. And she's featured in the book, Amazing Woman, It's Your Time to Emerge. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Becky.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here.
Oh, thank you. Becky, tell me, why do you believe telling our stories is a gateway for growth?
You know, I think that there's so many of us, especially, I think everyone has had something that shakes them to the core. And whether that happens when we're very, very young, like it did for me, or whether it's something in adulthood, where there's something that happens, and whether it's a health issue, doesn't matter what kind of an issue it is. It's sometimes we get immersed in the story of it all. And we don't voice the story. We just live it. We live what happened to us. And it comes down to a point where maybe we're not living the kind of life that we should be living, that we could be living, and we're not serving in the world in the way that would help, that we're here for. We're here to serve. We're here to shine the light. We're here to do so many things for the positive. But if we're immersed in a story that has rocked our world, we can't do that. And my discovery has been that sitting down and putting pen to paper to really put into perspective the things that have happened in our lives and where we are at the time, and also it just transforms. It's just a really huge transformation. But I also feel that storytelling is a part and parcel of the core of humanity. Because in that core of humanity, storytelling has been here since the beginning of time. And what I worry about is that people are losing that gift of storytelling because of all the modern technology that we have. Do we take the time to talk? And do we take the time to share the stories of what made us us and the journey that we've been on?
So what if you feel that you can't tell your story? You feel like you don't know how to write, you don't really know how to speak very well. How do you begin?
You know, that's very common. My voice was silenced for a very long time. And as a child, I heard constantly I was stupid, I was ugly, and I'd never make it in the world. And, you know, when you grow into adulthood, having heard that for a very long time, you believe it. You know, that's how you live. And it's in that journey to discover something far more than that, the inner calling that keeps saying, there is something more, you know, we've got to figure it out. And I think life brings us many things that help us to start realizing, like the lights start coming on, you know. And you know, what's interesting is in speaking with many women, there's so many, the first things out of our mouths are, who would want to hear my story? Why would anybody want to hear my story? And yet, who are you not to share your story? Because if you could transform the life of just one person, because of the power of your story. Is it worth it? Absolutely. But typically we reach far more than that when we share our stories.
Well, your own story is a powerful and quite honestly a sad one. What led you to believe that your story was worth sharing?
It was a lot of an inner journey, but also I was surrounding myself with people that were talking about who are you and what are you about, and really helping us, even things like the dreams and things like the power of your thoughts, all these things. As I started exposing myself more to that, I realized that there was great healing in putting pen to paper and really writing the story of my life. And then it developed there that I began to understand the full power, because how many of us have heard, we get to know, like you and I were talking, we haven't known each other very long, but I don't know much of your story other than what was written in this beautiful book that we both were part of on Emerge, Amazing Woman, It's Your Time to Emerge. But we really don't know each other too well till you start to share the story of what got you to where you are today. And then you start to understand. I have one of my authors, the name of her book is called Breaking to Be Me. And she had answered a challenge and jumped off the side of a cliff just thinking, oh, yeah, I'll be fine. I'm young. Well, she broke her back. And she was in such constant pain for such a very long time. And the doctors just said, it's all in your head. There's nothing we can do. But she was living on pain medication. And she finally found a doctor that worked with her to go deeper into the core issues of what was behind that pain. And now she lives a pain-free life and teaches others what she learned. And it's just amazing what she does. But until you understood her story, her backstory, you did not know what led her to the work that she's doing today. And look at you, with what you're teaching about dreams. There was something that led you to listening to this calling that you had, and it had to be a series of things that had gone on in your life that brought you to that point where you wanted to listen to dreams.
True. It's actually true. When you said that you got healing from telling your story, what exactly do you mean by that?
I actually wrote a book and published it, and it was released out to the world. And I was nervous because I was very authentic, very raw, very vulnerable in describing my story. But there was something magical that happened from it, not only in the writing, because in the writing, you start to get a whole different perspective. When you have to put pen to paper and get those juices going to be able to even write a book like that, then it was published. It became a #1 international bestseller. And then people started reaching out to me because in the book, I put my social media. I had a Facebook group and I was on different social medias. And people would reach out and say, thank you for having the courage to write a book like that, to share your story, to be authentic and vulnerable and show us a different way. And even men reached out and said, now I understand for the first time, I understand my mom, or I understand my wife. And that for some that in itself, when you know you can make a difference, when you realize what that does, it's almost like it sets you free. It's just pretty amazing.
It is. And the other part of it is that you realize that you're not alone, that there is a community out there.
That was huge. Yeah. Because we always think we are alone, and we are not alone.
This is so true. Well, as a result of this journey, you did found your own publishing company. And you say that one of your aims is to make authors or make writers authorpreneurs. Define that word for me.
Well, most of us will publish a book, and today's world is pretty amazing because of the tools and resources, just even publishing, period. Years ago, you would have to go through the chances of actually getting a book published in the traditional sense was quite a feat. And if you didn't have the connections, if you didn't really know how to go about doing that, it wasn't going to happen. Now we have self-publishing. We have books are being published. Hundreds of books are being published every day. And I always teach my authors to treat their book like it's a business. I kind of combine the word entrepreneur with authorpreneur. So that, to look at it, I'm sure most people have other resources and they're running a business or they're employed otherwise. But if they don't use this book as a tool to share their message and use the resources that we now have available to us, like your show, like other things, many, many other things that we have, then your book can get lost in the cobwebs of cyberspace. Nobody's going to know it's there unless you do something to make sure that other people know it's there. And so that's why I say become an entrepreneur, is treat the book like it's a part of your business or a tool for business growth. Get your message out there and stand on your story, not in your story, and grow from it and help others to grow. And that's that's just what I've been able to develop, because when I published that first book, I had women reaching out to me on a continual basis. Thank you for sharing. And how do I start sharing my story? And so I did 2 other books right after that book, one each year, that was called We Choose to Thrive. And many of the women in those books, there was 50 women between the 2 books. And many of them were telling their story for the first time in a chapter of it. And from that very act of sharing the story, and we did Facebook Lives on launch day, and we did all kinds of stuff with the tools we had available then. And those videos were getting shared out to 500, 600, 700 other people. And the comments that were coming from that. But I've been able to have the blessed privilege, and I'm still working with some of them, that are just now, many years later, saying, I'm ready to share my story. I've got my story written, and I'm ready to stand up in the world and share it. But so many of the women in those 2 books have gone on to do amazing things. They're now coaches, and they've got nonprofit organizations started. They've got all kinds of things to further their cause of what kept them held down for so long. But it was all because they were willing to stand up and share.
Well, so far you've been talking about people who telling their stories, people who have had traumas or have had misfortunes in their lives. What about the person who kind of feels like there is nothing bad in their life? What about their story? Is that also worth sharing?
Oh my goodness, so important, because they've had a wealth of goodness that has been in their life, and they've learned even from the good that has transpired. But you can't keep your story to yourself. You got to talk. There's something that they're an expert in. There's something that they're very good at, and it's time to share. What our world needs more than anything else is for those of us that have the heart to do so, is to stand up and lead in all the ways that we can, because we have the tool sets available. Look at what we're doing on Zoom right now. What we have, the tools, the amazing technology that we're able to use to share and to lead and to step into our greatness and help others to do the same.
That is so true and so powerful. And on that note, we're going to take a short break here. We are speaking about the power of story with Becky Norwood, and we'll be right back. If you're not pleased with the trajectory of your life, the time to begin your own personal transformation is now, and your dreams can help pave the way. How? By tapping into your unvoiced confidence. What is unvoiced confidence, you say? It's the acceptance of your abilities and qualities. It's a state of mind coming from liking and even loving yourself, and feeling free to say or do anything you want without concern for the judgment of others. You were born confident, but may have had it chipped away little by little by the negative self-beliefs you've picked up over the years. If you're looking for the heightened energy, clarity of thought, and the feeling of being more alive that comes from self-confidence, you can rediscover it by paying attention to your dreams. Need some help doing this? Go to my website, thedreamcoach.net, and sign up for my complimentary dream discovery session. I can help show you how your dreams can help you return to the confident person you were always meant to be. Again, go to thedreamcoach.net. thedreamcoach.net.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking about the power of story with Becky Norwood. Becky, I understand that some people also like to call you the story whisperer. Tell me about that.
The story whisperer came about as, like you've heard the horse whisperer, the all the different kinds of connotations with that. But there's some, through conversation, I've been able to help people to bring that story to the fore and really, really understand the power of that story, but also to use the kind of words by asking questions, to use those words in a way that story, the telling of the story, the writing of the story becomes a true gift and becomes part and parcel really of what they step into. I find it's very transformational for them. Working with them is amazing because you see the changes that spring forth from that. So it's kind of along the same lines of that horse whisperer. And I think we've all seen that movie, and it was like, I could watch it 100 times. I really enjoyed that movie. But you could take a horse that was not too happy about life and get him to almost purr. And that's kind of the idea behind this is to pull out those stories and to really even make sense of the story as we're telling it, and then how it affects our future generations. Because, what I find interesting, and I know I'm kind of going a little bit all over the place, but when we're able to convey a story, it touches lives. It has great, great impact for all of us. And yet, there's a PBS series with William Henry Gates Jr. that's called Finding Your Roots. And he interviews famous people, politicians, movie stars, hundreds of people that he's interviewed, and they do the research and the DNA background. But most people, what was striking to me is that beyond their parents' generation and maybe sometimes the grandparents' generations, people have no idea what their ancestors did in the past. They did not know where they came from, really the roots, what their ancestors went through to get to this place. And through the DNA, they were able to go back and really, really search. And there was some very big misunderstandings of what their past, where they came from and where their heritage is. And that's everybody in general. And I think, what are we learning from history? And why do we keep repeating history?
It's because so many people don't think history matters and don't pay attention to it. And I find also it's often hard to get people to really be interested in exploring their roots past their grandparents, for example.
Yeah, but not even, a lot of them don't even know what their grandparents, what they stood for and what they were all about. And I'm one of those because my family was so divided that nobody wanted to talk about it. I did know about a great grandmother who lived to 106, and she was born during an Indian raid going from, she was born in Arkansas during an Indian raid going to live in California, and then in covered wagons. It was just amazing. But the thing is how do we teach our children, and how do we stop repeating the things of the past? And in that regard, my father was the one that was extremely abusive to all of our family members. And what my mom went through with him was horrible. And the telling of the story brought healing to my own family. But he looked at me not long before he took his life, and he said, "You broke the pattern of abuse in our family."
And how did that feel to hear that?
Yeah. So it was, I was like, what are you talking about? you know. And when he said that, I was just in awe. But it touched my heart deeply because I said to him, abuse doesn't work, makes people mean. And so that really helped me to see that he did notice, even though he was terribly, he had came from a terrible abusive background as well. And so, but he recognized it. He was able to see that I could rise above it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I interviewed somebody a couple of months ago who talked about how emotional DNA is passed through generation to generation. So all these habits that we usually don't think about emotional things being something that's passed on like hair color is. And it is. And so when you are aware of it, it gives you the opportunity to make a stop to it or to change it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what you're saying too is one of the things about story. Telling the story allows that awareness to happen.
It does, and it's beautiful because in the telling of the story, not only does it open your eyes about yourself, it helps to piece together a lot of things that maybe you've never really given in depth, or you were confused about, or didn't understand why and the what and all of the other pieces that go into it. But then when you are able to understand your own story and then share your story, there's a magic that happens with it, total magic, because it's like you've grown from your story and you're making a difference in somebody else's life.
Absolutely. And I have to be honest, when I was writing the story that's in the book that both you and I have stories, I had this revelation in my own story that I hadn't really been aware of, where I was in a situation many, many years ago when I lost a job and it put me into a big state of depression. I really felt like a failure. And I realized that what was really getting to me at the time was my total lack of self-confidence, which is what I wrote about in the book. And I realized that at the time, I didn't realize that it was self-confidence I was suffering from. I thought it was just being a failure in my job, like not being good, or all these circumstances that happened. And coming to that realization was like it answered so many questions about what I had gone through back in those days. And you're right. I may not have gotten to that particular point if I hadn't written about it. So it's so true.
Right. No, that's right.
What the story does. And it brings me to my next question, which is that you found that one theme that binds a lot of us is a lack of self-worth. So I just told you what happened in my case, but in the authors that you've dealt with, and even in yourself, how does telling our story boost our self-worth?
I think that it's when you answer the call, because I think there's something, for me, that story burned within me when I knew that I was going to write this book. It took me a long time to have the courage to do it, number one, and then to publish it. Oh my gosh, what would I do? Why? But then when you're able to piece together the puzzle of really the core of how it affected you and how you're living your life, and then you're standing up and telling the story for the first time, and then 5 years later, you're standing up and telling the story. Your story's different. Your story evolves because you grow, if you allow yourself to grow. But it is in the speaking of the story, and it's in the sharing, the authentic sharing of the story is where incredible healing comes. And then you begin to understand, I have so much to give. I have so much. There are people that need to hear my story. Even if it wasn't for anybody else, if it's for ourselves, because of the different sensory things that take place because of sharing.
Mm-hmm. So true. When you talk about your publishing company, you have a couple of terms that I find interesting. One of them is a word that I hadn't encountered before, way shower. What does that mean?
A way shower is somebody, the that shows the way. And I think of it in the light of don't hide your light under the bushel basket kind of a connotation. When we begin to talk about the things that happen to us and what it's the journey that we've been on to transform our own lives, it's like we're holding our lights up bright and we're providing a light to show the way to a different way of looking at life and to a different way of approaching life and to ways that we can heal, to ways we can progress in life. And so to me, a way shower is somebody that just holds the light for somebody else to see the truth of their worth.
Fascinating. And another thing you say is that by telling a well-told story, we can become advocates.
Okay. Yeah. Advocates are people that stand for others that don't have a voice or don't feel they have a voice. And as we stand up and we speak on behalf of those, so we think of all the amazing people in our world that have, in some way or another, stood up with a strong voice. And there's been many people that have. Maya Angelou, Oprah Winfrey, Nelson Mandela, these people have been the voice. They've become advocates to show a whole different way. And I think in the power of a well-told story, we can become advocates for those that have no realization that they do have a voice or that they are worthy of anything but what they're currently going through. Mm-hmm. It just shines a whole different light.
Right. And once they tell that story, new worlds open up, not just for them, but for the people who hear it.
Right.
Wonderful. How does it feel for you to be the catalyst for others to tell their stories?
I love it because I don't know, I've learned the power of story. And when I can see somebody, the lights come on, and the realization and the going within that takes place through that whole process, it makes such a difference for me. And it always keeps me moving forward too. Because, we all have stuff that goes on in life, that sometimes it's easy to go slipping back in the other direction. But when you're making a difference for others, and, just I wanted to read this to you, if you give me just a minute to find it. It was incredible because the other day, now this lady, I had published a book for her probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And it was so beautiful because I get this text message after our book, The Amazing Woman, It's Your Time to Emerge. And I am hoping I can find it really quick here. But anyway, I get this text message and my phone had done an update, so it didn't save the names. And so it just said Rhonda, and I didn't know which Rhonda is this. So I said, she goes, this is what she said. I purchased Amazing Woman, It's Your Time to Emerge this morning. I skipped to your chapter and couldn't finish reading it. I just can't right now. I will go back and read it when I have time alone. Then I'll go back and read the entire book. These past 2 years have left me tired but reflective. Your words, I discovered that life had prepared me with unique experiences, well-earned wisdom, creative talents, and treasured gifts. I have learned that the only real failure in life is to grow from what we have gone through. Thank you for writing this. I hope to find the courage to know that for myself.
Oh, wow. That is so beautiful.
And I read this to my husband and he just started crying. He says, that's all you've ever wanted was to affect at least one person. Mm-hmm. And these words it touched me. It was just like, it was amazing. And that's the power of story.
Oh, yes. And on that note, I just have time for one final question. Mm-hmm. How can people find out more about you and your services?
Well, I'm all over social media. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, all of them. My website is spotlightpublishing.pro. And I do have a PDF download. I think it's called spotlightpublishing.pro 4 pillars. I think that's what it's called. And that's kind of goes into more depth about the role of the power of story and the 4 pillars of a story well told.
Wonderful. Becky, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today. We've been speaking with Becky Norwood about the power of story. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If you have, please tell all your friends, follow me, and drop a positive review on your podcast site. And if you're on Clubhouse, join me in my club, Club Dreams, where I host weekly rooms on all aspects of dream work. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.